Good morning, St. Andrew family. Welcome to our Sunday morning online worship service. I'm Justin Bullis, and it is my privilege to welcome you here today from the St. Andrew Sanctuary. I'm grateful, as always, to share this sacred online space with you, where we are all invited, included, and valued as vital and beloved members of our broader worshiping community. St. Andrew is proud to be an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes all people into the full life and communion of our church. This includes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here and you belong here. Please take a moment to visit gostandrew.com/sign-in to let us know that you're here and to share some information about yourself. We'd love to know from where or from when you're joining us, or if you have any prayer requests or questions about our church. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the work God is doing in and through the St. Andrew community, you can email us directly at connect@gostandrew.com. We would love to hear from you. Also, be sure to check out the announcement slides at the end of this video to see some upcoming events and opportunities to get more involved. You can also visit the events page on our website to see an updated events calendar. Lastly, if you would like to contribute a financial gift to the work and ministry of St. Andrew, you can visit gostandrew.com/give or text St. Andrew to 28950. And now let's listen together as Reverend Mark brings us the second sermon in our current Stewardship series, Sowing the Seed.
Matthew 13, the parable of the sower. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen."
So I read a discouraging report recently that hit me pretty hard, although it does confirm what I've always suspected over the course of my ministry. Every week I spend about 10 or 12 hours studying a passage of Scripture, reflecting on its meaning, researching concepts and clues, and rewriting a sermon like this sermon that I'm preaching right now. And then every week I stand up here before a camera or before the congregation for about 20 minutes, and I preach that very sermon, pretty confident, of course, that it's absolutely going to change your life and maybe, probably even change the world. But according to this recent study I read, it turns out that you'll forget most of this sermon somewhere between the closing song and whatever you're going to do next. We humans apparently retain only about 5 to 10% of what we hear through spoken communication. Even if we're listening attentively, which I know you are right now, we'll lose about 40% of what we hear after just 2 minutes. But it gets worse. After 6 hours, we'll forget about 60% of what we hear. After a week, 90%. This, by the way, is why ministers go to therapy, because it's hopeless. You remember at best only 10% of what we say. We've got maybe 2 minutes tops to get through to you before you're thinking, "I'm sorry, did you say something?" It's so bad that even the, quote, preaching to the choir is apparently futile. From a purely business perspective, you could argue that a 10% retention rate on a 10 to 12 hour investment of time doesn't look so good on paper. There's a metric that measures this kind of thing objectively. It's called return on investment, ROI. ROI is the basic metric we use to quantify the profitability of an investment. It compares how much we put into a project to how much at the end of the day we earned. It answers the question, did I get out of it more than I put into it? In our culture, we apply ROI to all kinds of endeavors in life, even those beyond business transactions. We all want to know, what's the return on my investment here? Will this new friendship or romance fill my bucket or drain it? Is free climbing El Capitan without a rope really worth the risk of seriously dying? Will scrolling through TikTok videos for hours and hours really make me a better person? Now, the ROI for these might be much harder to measure, but if you're considering investing real dollars into something real, you'd probably make your decision based on at least two factors. One, probability, that is, the likelihood of a payout, and two, percentage, that is, the net gain that you'd expect from your investment. If you're not following this, consider last week's Powerball lottery. The percentage gain on buying a winning $2 ticket was 10 to the 9th power, an astronomical, unfathomable return. But the probability of an actual payout was just 1 in 290 million. Not super great. This is why it's called gambling and not businessing. The lottery is never a great business strategy. But every good business person knows that ROI looks for favorable odds and a favorable return. But then Jesus shows up and tells this parable that blows our ROI assumptions right out of the water. The parable is about a farmer who goes out and sows some seeds. And I don't know what school of farming he happened to go to, but this farmer seems to be doing all of it wrong. He's sowing seeds indiscriminately, even recklessly, with no apparent strategy for where the seeds would fall. This isn't how farmers grow a business. Seed is a valuable, expensive commodity. But this farmer is negligent, even wasteful. He's not careful or meticulous or intentional about where he throws the seed. It just lands everywhere. And some seed, it falls on the path. Some falls among the gravel and rocks. Some land among the thorny weeds. You'd call this a high-risk, low-probability kind of investing. None of these seeds has a chance of ever growing. The odds are insurmountable. In fact, in the parable, they are eaten by the birds. They're scorched by the sun. They're choked out by the weeds. And you look at this farmer and you think, what a simp. But just when you're ready to write him off as a fool, Jesus says it turns out some of the seed actually landed on good soil and grew and produced a harvest, and not just any ordinary run-of-the-mill harvest. This seed produced an ROI beyond the farmer's wildest dreams. Some yielded 100-fold, some 60, some 30. It's an odd story, maybe even unbelievable. I mean, think about this. The farmer's seed fell in 4 different types of soil, 3 of which were really inhospitable. The odds of anything growing there were improbable. Only 25% of the soil was likely to produce any grain at all. And even then, It would be unreasonable to expect a return of 100x or 60x, even 30x. Improbable odds. Exponential returns. Low probability, outrageous payouts. And we'd say, Jesus, this isn't how the world works. But Jesus says, I didn't say this is how the world works. All I'm saying is this is how God works. I said earlier in this sermon that it's unlikely you'll remember anything from this sermon by the time you are finished with it, which is why I take great satisfaction knowing that most people who heard Jesus preach didn't remember much of what he said either. Mostly because they didn't understand his crazy, ridiculous, unbelievable stories. None of them made any practical sense. Think about some of them. Do you remember the one about that petulant kid who asked his dad for his inheritance early? He said, Dad, I know you're not dead yet, but can we just pretend that you are so I can finally live my life the way I want to live it? The father cuts him a check. And the kid, he goes and blows his entire inheritance at the craps table in Vegas. And he comes back home and he puts on this Oscar-winning act. He begs for mercy. And his father embraces him, forgives him, even throws a welcome home party. And we'd say, that father is a codependent, a pushover, a doormat. He needs some healthy emotional boundaries. He needs a serious spine. And Jesus says, well, that father is like God, ever loving, always forgiving, never willing to give up or throw in the towel on you and me. There's that one about a rancher. The rancher owns a vineyard and it's harvest time. The rancher needs some helpers. So he drives into town, he hires a few, he brings them back to the ranch. By mid-morning, more workers are needed, so he returns to town, he brings back more. He does this all day, back and forth, hiring more workers until the job is done. And at the end of the day, it's time to settle up with all those workers. But the rancher pays each of those workers the same wage, regardless of how many hours they actually worked. It's a pretty good deal for the late crew. And we'd say, well, that's not fair. And it's certainly no way to run a business, and I'm pretty sure there's a labor law violation somewhere in that story, Jesus. And Jesus, he just says, God is like that farmer, always generous even to the least deserving. Parables aren't lessons on morality or good behavior. They're about the deep, mysterious nature of God, who God is, what God is like, what divine love looks like, and how often we happen to come up short. Parables, by nature, aren't very clear or rational because God's nature, God's purposes are not always clear or rational, at least not to the human mind. This farmer sows seeds, just going around throwing seeds everywhere without paying attention to where they land. It's just careless. And we'd say, that's a sketchy business model. This is no way to sow seeds. But this isn't a lesson on modern farming practices any more than Moby Dick is a lesson on deep sea fishing. This is a story about a God who is a soulful speculator, a divine contrarian, a magnanimous sower of seeds who doesn't make distinctions between good soil and bad soil, because to God, all soil has the potential for an amazing harvest. Even the rocky, shallow, thorny soil. While we are all hedging our bets, looking for the sure thing, strategizing for the highest ROI, God is just blanketing the world, even the most inhospitable places, blanketing the world with seeds of grace and possibility, calling, wooing, luring them to life, to growth, to abundance. God is like that. God is like Diana Ross singing, "Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no river wide enough, ain't no valley low enough to keep me from getting to you, babe." Thorny, rocky, shallow soil. Who knows if the seeds will ever grow there? In this parable, they seem to face some serious obstacles. The odds aren't favorable, but that won't stop God from trying. God will never give up on the soil of your life or the soil of this world. Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Annie Dillard, she wrote an autobiography years ago titled An American Childhood. She grew up in Pittsburgh. She was really smart. By the age of 15, she'd read through all the books in the public library near her home. After reading all those books, she decided that religion was worthless, that God didn't really exist. So she took it upon herself at age 15 to show up at her church and to sit down with her pastor. And she said to her pastor, "I want my name off the roll. I don't believe in God anymore." And the pastor said, "Okay." Dillard said, "You're not going to try to argue me out of this?" And the pastor said, No, you're too smart for me. There's no way I could argue you back in." So she said, "I want my name off the roll." And he said, "Look, it's off." And she said, "Okay." And as she walked out, the pastor muttered to himself, "She'll be back." And Dillard wheeled around and said, "What did you say?" And the pastor said, I said I presumed that you'll probably be back." And she said, "Look, this is my life. I live my life like I want to live my life. I'm not coming back." And the pastor said, "Okay." And years later, Dillard wrote in her autobiography, quote, "As I write this, I'm 48 years old, and I'm back." This isn't a parable about soil. If it were, we'd call it the parable of the 4 kinds of soil, but it's called the parable of the sower, because it's about a God who sows seeds when and where and how God chooses, undeterred by the thorns, weeds, and shallowness of our lives. If nothing grows this year, that won't stop God from sowing more seeds next year. God is magnanimous that way. I love that word, magnanimous. I read something this week that, once again, you likely won't remember, but if you remember only 10% of this sermon, try to remember this. The word magnanimous, it comes from 2 Latin words, magnus, meaning great, and animus, meaning soul or spirit. To be a magnanimous person is to have a great soul, to be a great soul, an enlarged soul, a soul so big, a heart so full that you can afford to give some of it away, even to the thorny, rocky, shallow ground. God is magnanimous. And don't you want to be magnanimous like God? Not long ago, I reconnected with someone I hadn't heard from in 20 years. He and his wife attended the first church I served in Southern California, although his wife attended more often than he did. He was a successful Wall Street trader. He was also a pro-am golfer, which meant that while his family was praying in church on Sundays, he was usually praying on the putting greens. He'd come to church occasionally, but then, just like that, he and his family just moved away. And I never heard from them again until just a few years ago when he emailed me. And in the email he said, as a pastor, sometimes you sprinkle seeds and you never know what happened. Did they fall on dry, cracked ground? Did they land in fertile soil? He went on. He said, you planted seeds 20 years ago, and at that time, my soil was very dry. I was a child of the world, he said, blind to everything but my own selfish desires. But he said, I was there at your church, and when I was there, I listened. And that's why I wanted you to know that today I'm devoted to serving God with my life. It turns out a trip to Africa changed everything for him. He saw firsthand the poverty and desperation there, and when he returned home, he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. So he established this global foundation to help the people of Nakuru, Kenya. He built a school for children living in this little village there. In fact, he built it at the village dump site because that's where children gather every day to search for food. And today, more than 200 students are enrolled in that school. Families living around the dump site receive medical care and counseling services. He even recently wrote a book about this whole experience entitled, I Am Not a Grasshopper. God is like that, magnanimous, sowing seeds in the improbable, inhospitable soil of our lives until one day it grows. It grows us into followers of Christ who hear the call to sow seeds also in improbable soil, places like a dump site, trusting and sowing in faith and hope and love. You know, we are not either good soil or bad soil, as if we could only be one or the other. And some Christians are so spiritually proud they think they must be great soil when they're probably actually more like a pile of manure. And others are so spiritually ashamed and so spiritually shut down and so spiritually or physically or emotionally traumatized that they might think they're bad soil, rocky, shallow, thorny. But the truth is, we're not either one or the other, we're both. Only I don't like the labels of good soil and bad soil. We might think of ourselves instead as a combination of fertile soil and undeveloped soil. You have so much undeveloped soil within you. Soil that probably has some issues, maybe needs some serious work and attention. Soil that cries out for a magnanimous God to sow seeds and bring out something new and beautiful and unexpected. So take some time this week and look at your life. Behold the things that need work, the rocks, the thorns, the shallowness. Offer these to God. Welcome the seeds. Care for them, protect them, invest in them. And know also that you have such fertile soil within you. God is working in and with that soil even when you do not always see it. So again, look at your life. Behold the good things God is producing in you and through you and with you and all around you. And give thanks for these things. Care for them. Protect them fiercely. Invest more in them and in the things that make them grow. I could name a few of those things, but again, you'd probably forget before this sermon's even over. But it is stewardship season here. In the coming days, as you think about what you give to and the good things in your life, remember the fertile soil that is St. Andrew and the seeds that God is planting here, the harvest God is producing through this church. And be magnanimous like God. Because you've probably already forgotten most, if not all, of what I've said. Let's make this one easy to remember today. God is magnanimous. Be magnanimous like God.
God was never angry. God was not against me. God was never far away. God's not disappointed. God's not keeping score, and God's not judging my mistakes. God is light. God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good. God is grace. God will never hide her face. As God is.
Hi, St. Andrew. I'm Megan Amonson.
And I'm Travis. We were asked to share why we give to St. Andrew and why it's important to us as a family.
Where do we begin? We give because it's important to us and we believe it's the right thing to do. St. Andrew has become a home for us, and we love the message of love and acceptance that is the heart of this church. We want our children to know that we believe in loving people where they are at, and that at the foot of the cross, all people are equal.
Megan and I have been going to church together since early on in our relationship. As we have grown as a couple, so has our faith together. We started at St. Andrew during Rev Mark's sermon series called A House Divided. We both quickly fell in love with the messages that were being shared and felt like this community was a great place to raise our kids.
Travis and I both work within the public school system. We believe that working with kids and families is a great way to serve others on a daily basis. We have carried that over to St. Andrew, where we volunteer to teach in the preschool classroom. We love watching the youngest blessings of this church explore their relationship with God and how that relationship will grow and change over time.
Recently, our youngest, Jace, has taken an interest in attending Sunday service for us one Sunday a month. For the most part, he stays pretty quiet, so we have enjoyed it too. But in all honesty, we love that he is getting a feel of what St. Andrew is all about. Not only does he get to socialize and meet others his age, but he gets to see that a church service has a variety of components. His favorite so far is definitely the great music we are blessed with each week. But don't worry, I will not be volunteering to sing anytime soon. We do hope our kids join the wonderful kids choir soon, though.
Thank you, St. Andrew. We feel truly blessed to be part of this community, and we look forward to many more opportunities of being able to give.
And now, as you return to the rhythms and routines of your busy lives this week, I leave you with this benediction from the immortal work of Marvin Gaye and Diana Ross. Listen, baby, ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide enough. If you need me, call me, no matter where you are, no matter how far, don't worry. Just call my name, I'll be there in a hurry. You don't have to worry. 'Cause baby, there ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you. Remember the day I set you free. I told you you could always count on me. And from that day on, I made a vow I'll be there when you want me, some way, somehow. 'Cause baby, there ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you. Oh no, darling, no wind, no rain, or winter's cold can stop me, 'cause you are my love. If you're ever in trouble, I'll be there on the double. Just send for me. My love is alive, way down in my heart, although we are miles apart. If you ever need a helping hand, I'll be there on the double, just as fast as I can. Don't you know that there ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you?